Most of us really do hope the people that we love will someday find their way back to God. But how do we go beyond merely hoping to actually helping bring people back to God? If we can learn how to better love our neighbors, I know we can change the world. With simple and intentional action, let's bless our neighbor.
Well, good morning. It is good to see you today. Before we dive in, I want to tell you about what's coming next because I'm really excited about this series we're going to start in 2 weeks. It is called Whole Soul, W-H-O-L-E, Whole Soul. And what we're doing is we're really tapping into the fact that God wants you to be whole, physically, mentally, spiritually. There's a lot of things that go into how you feel and what's going on. And so we're going to dive into this whole idea of what's going on the inside makes a huge impact on what goes on the outside. And so join us for Whole Soul as we kind of explore this very simple idea that fixing your mind on Christ fixes your mind. So if you know anybody that's been kind of struggling with their inner world and mental health and things like that, this is going to be a fantastic time, but it's also going to be a great time for you just to understand what God's picture looks like for you to be whole. So I hope you'll join us for that. It's going to be a fantastic time together. Now, we are in our Bless series, and before we dive into even that, I want to ask you a question. I'm making a big assumption, so I'll just say it that way. I am making a very big assumption about you today, and I know you're not supposed to do that because you write the assumption on the board, when you assume, the whole thing. I get all of that. But I think this one's pretty safe. I really do. Because this one, I hear it all the time. I hear people say it all the time. I hear people describe people this way all the time. And so I think it's pretty safe to say that you want to be great and you want to have a great day. I mean, about you, I hear all the time, hey, have a great day, or you're doing great, or you're so great, I really appreciate, you hear all that kind of stuff all of the time. And then the extra cheesy, over the top, hokey, it's a great day to have a great day. You're kind of like, what are you selling, right? It's just nobody talks like that. But you probably do want to be great. There was recently a book on the bestseller list. It was one of those self-help books, and it just said, be great today. And it soared. I mean, everybody bought this book because they were so excited about this idea of being great. So let me ask you a question. Why wouldn't you want to be great? What's the alternative? Be okay today, be average, have a so-so day, do a kind of job. I mean, nobody wants to just be in the middle. We want to be great. And so this idea isn't really all that uncommon. As a matter of fact, Jim Collins wrote a book, if you follow, authors and things like that, in the early 2000s. And the name of his book was Good to Great, which, it's like, what does that actually mean? And I'm going to tell you about it. And you may think that's not very interesting, but hang on, because there is a payoff at the end. This Good to Great book that he wrote, he surveyed the leaders of all these Fortune 500 companies. And his whole premise was, there is something behind why some companies are great and others aren't. And not just great, but great for a long time. I mean, anybody can kind of get lucky and hit a lucky streak for a few years. But his theory was, there is a reason that some companies seem to just have great results and they stay there. What is it that brings that about and what causes that? And so he studied all kinds of factors. He looked at all this stuff. And what he came back with was really two things. That in every one of those cases, the companies that were great and maintained it had great leaders, which that's not a big shock. And really, if you think about it, all of the people that lead companies, I mean, you're kind of operating in a different zone, right? They're all smart or you don't get that job, right? They're all hard workers. I mean, lazy people don't become CEOs. And they're all kind of creative and innovative because people that don't even try, they don't get to that spot. So they all had that in common. But he found what he called these level 5 leaders. These were the guys that were just, and gals that were just different. They seemed to be great all the time. And the more he studied, the more he narrowed it down to one thing. As far as I know, Jim Collins is not a follower of Jesus. But he said this, the best of the best have one thing in common. They're servant leaders. The way they lead is different. It's not about them. It's not about their ego. It's not about them getting more and having more. They lead like a servant. And this was actually pretty crazy because outside of people that love and know God and follow the Bible, this is a weird idea. The best of the best serve. And it kind of turned the business community on its ear because it was so unusual. Level 5 leaders, servant leaders, are those that are great. which I thought was pretty outstanding. And the reason that it kind of came to mind as we were talking about this today, to really be who we are trying to be, we're going to have to be great. You're going to have to be great. We're going to have to be great together. Because what we want to do is something very significant. We want to help bring people back to God. We want to be helping people find their way back to God, not hoping people find their way back to God. And to do that, it's going to require us to be great, which may feel a little intimidating, but hopefully by the end of the day, you won't feel intimidated by that at all. We've been talking all through this series. If you're just joining us, you can catch up very quickly. You can jump on YouTube and kind of follow us. But one of the things we've said is we want everybody to get a bless card. And on one side of the card is our little word bless and our little happy emoticon guy. And on the back, it's blank with some slots that you can write some names on there. And what we've challenged everybody to do is write the names of the people that you feel like God has placed in your life for you to bless. So in my case, I've got 5 different families on here, and they're my neighbors. Every one of them lives on my street. And I believe that God's placed us in the house that we're in. I believe God has placed the people around us that he's placed around us, and that he is asking me, calling me, commanding me to bless those people. But I got to be honest. Names on a card don't really mean much, do they? I mean, anybody can write names on a card. That doesn't change anything. I mean, it's nice that you sat down and thought about who you would write down, and maybe you wrote some of them down, and maybe it's around, or, kind of you put it somewhere. I know it's somewhere. I just don't know where it is. And writing names on a card doesn't really do anything. And pushing just a little bit further, this whole idea of bless, we've been throwing around this bless word a lot. It's kind of squishy, isn't it? Like if you were going to describe to somebody, I'm blessed. Well, what does that mean? Or I want to bless someone. What are you going to do? Like you got some magic dust, or you're going to wave a wand? I mean, what does that really mean? And so as we've gone through this blessed series, what we've tried to do is put some real handles on this. And these aren't tasks to do. These are our best understanding of what Jesus did and that he commanded us to do that we can model and also carry out. Now, they're not crazy over-the-top kinds of things. They're not things that only certain superstar-type people can do. It's stuff that anybody could do. And so, as we've talked about blessed, we've said each of these letters stands for something. And so, the B in blessed stands for begin with prayer. And it's a very simple idea that if there are people in my life that I want to bless, the best way to do that is to actually start praying for them. And as I pray for them, something happens in me too. I am praying God's power on them and God's power in their life, but it's amazing. When I start to pray for them, something starts to change inside of me about how I see that person and how I think about that person. So the first one was to begin with prayer. The second one was to listen, to just simply listen. And like I said, these are not crazy hard things to do. But at the same time, in a culture that we live in right now, where everybody is shouting, whether it's on TV or social media or wherever they're shouting from, telling you what to believe and what you should do and who's right and why their position is the right one and everybody else is terrible, to actually take a different approach and say, I want to hear you. I want to hear what you have to say. I want to know what's going on in your life. How are you doing? What are you excited about? What are you concerned about? What does your future look like? When we start to listen to people, pretty amazing things starts to happen. One, they begin to trust us. And two, it's amazing what you can learn about somebody if you actually listen to them. They will kind of tell you what's going on in their life. And as you're praying for them and you start listening to them, then we talked about last week, why don't we eat with them? Why don't we start to develop a relationship with them? You see, these are not steps to accomplish some goal to check off a target. I'm praying for someone. I'm listening to what's going on in their life. I'm carving time out of my life to spend with them, to build a relationship with them because I want to know what's going on. And then today, we're talking about serving. That one of the ways I can bless the people in my life that God has put in my life and put around my life is to serve them. And so I'm going to pray for them, I'm going to listen to them, I'm going to eat with them, and I'm going to serve them. And it's not, again, this huge overarching thing, but it does kind of feel frustrating sometimes. For a lot of us, it feels like, I don't have time, right? That's hard. I mean, the people in my family, I want to serve them. And if you've got kids, it's kind of funny. You started off as being the ones in charge, and now you're like the head servants, right? I mean, you're just like running around doing everything for them and making sure they're taken care of. It's like I can serve my family, and, if there was an emergency or something, but I just don't have a lot of time. I don't have a lot of whatever it takes to serve other people. And what happens is, a lot of times we find ourselves, not on purpose, but we start sliding into this idea of, I'm just kind of hoping things work out instead of helping because I don't have time. Here's my theory on this. This is just Brett's theory, okay? My theory on this is because we forget. So I want to help you remember. I want you to take a moment, just kind of take a minute right now. When was the last time somebody served you? And if that whole idea, that word serve doesn't fit, like, okay, somebody helped you, somebody was considerate of you, somebody encouraged you. I want you to think back. When was the last time that happened? And it could be big or small. Maybe your hands were full and somebody just, jumped out of their way and opened the door for you and you're like, oh, thank you so much. I didn't know how I was going to do this. I appreciate that so much. Or it could be, kind of all the other extreme. Somebody actually brought me into their family. So think about the last time somebody served you well. They were very considerate. They were very helpful, and it got your attention. And as you're thinking about that, here's the challenge. What did it stir up in you? I mean, what were the feelings that went along with it? How did you feel about them and the situation and everything else when they did that for you? Were you excited? Were you honored? Did you feel like, wow, that's so considerate, so thoughtful. I feel loved. I feel like I'm being included. I mean, what were the things that were going on inside of you when somebody actually served you and helped you in a meaningful way? Now, here's your assignment, okay? I want you to narrow that down to one word. If you could take all of that and narrow it down to one word, what would that one word be? Now, here's where it's going to get a little bit weird, but just hang in there with me, all right? What I'm going to have you do is tell somebody else your one word, all right? Now, if you happen to be sitting around people you know, that's great. If you're not, that's okay. You can tell a stranger because we're all going to do it together, all right? So what I want you to do is get your one word in mind, and then on the count of three, I just want you to look at somebody else in here and tell them your one word, all right? 1, 2, 3. Oh, wow, that's you guys are like whispering. Let's try this again. Out loud, tell your one word. You ready? 1, 2, 3. All right, good. Appreciate that. That's good. For me, it was honored. When I look back at what somebody did I was just stunned that they would do that for me. It wasn't a need. It wasn't anything that was, expected. And it just kind of, it honored me. I think sometimes the reason we push away from serving is because we forget what it feels like. We tend to think of it as one thing to do or another thing to do or something that I got to try to fit in, not realizing that the person that we are serving feels like you felt, gets that kind of impact that you had. Even though we're just trying to fit it in, it's a difference maker for them. Now, Jesus talked about everything under the sun, everything important under the sun. And one of the things Jesus talked about was being great. And to be honest with you, Jesus is not against you being great. As a matter of fact, he wants you to be great. He is all for you having ambition to be great and to do great things. And he talked about this, and I want to read this passage to you in just a moment. He talked about this in a weird setting. You see, his guys were arguing about who was most important. And if Jesus wasn't around, who gets to be in charge? And who's kind of second and third, and who's the best one, right? Like, we got to stack everybody up and measure everybody and make sure we know who's who. And in the middle of all this, instead of embarrassing everybody, Jesus talks about what it looks like to be great and to think about a great life. And he does this in Mark chapter 10. I'm just going to put it up here for you. I want to read this with you. He's talking to his guys, and he says it this way. He says, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. And just kind of pause right there. In essence, he's saying, you know how this goes, right? Most of the time, when somebody's in charge, when somebody has all the money, when somebody has all the power, what do? They make it about them. They get what they want. They have everything done the way they want it done. They make everything about them being comfortable, them being happy, and they use that power and authority and wealth to get what they want. Verse 43, not so with you. If you're going to follow me, if you're going to go with me, if you're going to let me be the Lord and leader of your life, it's not going to be like that for you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. Must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first must be a slave of all. I mean, Jesus took something that everybody understood. Whoever has the gold makes the rules, right? And he said, it doesn't really work that way. That's not what it means to be great. What it means to be great is to do the one thing that most people don't want to do, to make it about somebody else. Most of us want to make it about us. And I'm going to use whatever I have to make it more about me. And Jesus says the truly great, don't do it that way. They serve. And to kind of capitalize it, if you still got questions, he says, verse 45, for even the Son of Man, that was one of Jesus' favorite ways of referring to himself. And in other words, even I did not come to be served. I'm not here, even though I'm God in the flesh. I didn't come here to make everybody serve me, but I came to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. So here's Jesus saying, look, you know that old system, right? Where it's all about whatever you can get and the power and the authority and the influence and the money, and that person is the one who gets to be served. He says, I'm flipping that up. I'm flipping that over. That's not the way it's going to be. From now on, if you follow me, the money, the power, the influence, the authority that you have really just simply means you have more opportunities to serve. Everything was changed. Everything was flipped. And if you wanted to kind of just break it down into a very simple summary, we've been blessed to be a blessing. All the things that we have, all the opportunities, all the influence that we have, we can do one of two things with it. We can use it for ourselves, or we can be great, and we can use it to serve other people. This is a huge moment. This is not a small thing. This isn't just a nice teacher with some good philosophical ideas. Jesus is saying this is the direction of your life. All the stuff you have, all the things you do, all the influence, all the relationships, all of it. You can either do what everybody else does, or you can be great. And the way to be great is to serve. And if you're not sure about that, look at me. Look what I've done. Look how I am going about this. You've been blessed. Yes, absolutely. God has lavishly blessed you because he loves you and because he wants you to be a blessing. Well, the story actually continues. And if you've got a Bible, or if you're in the app, we're going to be in Luke chapter 10. Because in Luke chapter 10, Jesus tells a story of the Good Samaritan. And it's a story that even if you don't go to church very much, if you haven't been around church very much, you've probably heard of it. You know how all the hospitals are called Good Samaritan and Samaritan's Purse and all these other things? It comes from this story. I mean, people refer back to this all the time without knowing it. And so, like I said, it's a pretty common story. And what's interesting about it to me is how it came about. See, there was a guy that came up and asked Jesus a question. But you need to understand the context of the question. He was Jewish, the guy that asked Jesus a question, and Jesus was Jewish. And every good Jewish person at that time in that part of the world knew two things. To be a good Jewish person meant two things. I got to love God with everything that I have, and I'm going to love my neighbor. The love God part, okay, there's really not a lot of wiggle room there. We understand what that is. We know what we're supposed to do. The love my neighbor part, that's frustrating. That's hard. That needs some definition. How are we actually supposed to do that? And who are we supposed to, and what does that mean really? And so here's what this guy was ultimately asking. What is the least that I have to do? Can you define neighbor so that I know who I have to love and who I can ignore? I'm really just trying to get this narrowed down to what is the least expectation? What is the minimum? Because that's what I want to shoot for. I'm not really worried about everybody else. I don't really want to love everybody else. What I want to know is, what do I have to do to get the check mark? That you did well, you're moral, you're a good Jew, God loves you and approves of you now. So what's the minimum I have to do to get God to sign off that I'm doing okay? That's what he was asking. Now, he did it in a very nice way, but that's a question he was asking Jesus. He was looking for an out. Who can I love? Who can I ignore? Who do I have to not worry about? Who are the people that matter? Who are the people that don't? Who are the ones that God cares about, and who are the ones that God doesn't care about? This is what I need to know so that I can kind of chart the rest of my life. And Jesus answers this question in Luke chapter 10, verse 29. The lawyer wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, who is my neighbor? In reply, Jesus said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, they beat him, and they went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, he passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, he came to where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and he bandaged his wounds, poured on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey and brought him to an inn and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? The expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. Jesus told him, go and do likewise. It's fascinating to me that this story has been told so many times. And if you've been in church, like I said, or if you've been around church, I'm sure you've heard it before. And I don't claim to have any unique insight or see something that nobody else has ever seen. But what struck me about it this time was the way the responses of the 2 different people were so different. The way the religious people responded and the way the Samaritan responded. They were so drastically different. You see, when the religious people saw the man on the road, and I know this is hard to kind of conceptualize. We don't see people beaten half to death, stripped of their clothes, have everything taken for them, and left to die on the side of the road. We don't see that. But they had seen it, and they saw it this day. And when the religious people saw it, instead of feeling the need that he had, they chose instead to ignore the need. They chose to ignore it. I don't want anything to do with that. And I don't know if this is what happened or not. Okay, this is just my imagination. I almost wonder if in their mind it kind of went like this. He probably deserved it. He shouldn't have been out here by himself. He should have had somebody with him. He was probably carrying too much things. He should have had some security. You know what? He might have been one of those guys that runs around and robs people, and he's just getting paid back. The choices he's made, the life he's lived, the things he's done, he probably deserved what happened to him. I'm not surprised at what happened to him. If those are the kind of choices he makes, if that's the kind of life he lives, you know what? Okay, so I'm just going to ignore the need. But they didn't stop there. It wasn't enough to ignore what they needed because he's laying in front of them. And so if you get this in your mind, they're either going to have to step over him or move. And they chose to move. They got to create some distance. I need to move away from the need, right? I don't want to see it. I don't want to think about it. He probably deserves what happened to him. And I need to create some space. They literally, physically went to the other side of the road. I got to get away from this because honestly, it's not my responsibility. It's somebody else's. His boss, his family, the police, social services, the government, somebody should be taking care of this guy, but not me. And so I'm going to ignore what's going on, and I got to create some distance because I don't want to get involved. And then ultimately, as you can imagine, they did nothing. They did nothing. They had places to go, things they needed to do. Stuff was going on. They were important people. I can't be stopping. I can't be taking my time with this. I've got to be in another spot. I've got something else I have to do. This is how the religious people responded. They ignored the need. They created some distance, and they did nothing. And then the Samaritan, very different response. A very different response. The Samaritan, he instead of ignoring what he saw, I think, again, this is my imagination, I think he saw himself. That could happen to me. I could be that guy. I could be the one laying over here beat up with all my stuff gone. Somebody takes my donkey and my money, takes my clothes, and just knocks me over the head and leaves me here. So bad that I can't even get up and walk myself. That could be me. See, he saw the need and he was willing to feel the need. He wasn't going to ignore it. And because he saw the need and he felt the need, he couldn't create distance. He actually had to close the distance. I can't move away from this because I've seen it, I felt it. I can't move further away. I actually have to move towards it. And he closed the distance. And not only is he feeling it and seeing it and closing the distance, he gets to the point where he has to do something. I can't ignore this anymore. I have to do something. I have to respond. And so he gives him first aid. He takes him to the end. And let me just kind of point out a little small thing here. He also didn't do a lot of things. He didn't fix everything. He didn't get the guy's money back. He didn't hunt down the guys that did this to him. He didn't start a program to make safer streets. I mean, there's nothing wrong with any of those things. He did what he could. in this moment, this is what I can do. I can give you some first aid and I can get you somewhere safe. And so many times when it comes to serving, that's exactly what God is looking for from us. Are you willing to see and feel the need? Are you willing to close the distance instead of create distance? And then are you willing to do something instead of doing nothing? And they're a much lighter level than this, but that's exactly what these blessed practices are. As I begin praying for somebody, you know what happens? My heart changes towards them. I start to pay more attention to them. I start to see what's going on in their life, and it tells me what else to pray for. And as I start to listen to them, I understand them a little bit better. I see how they see the world and what's happened in their past and what they're hoping for in the future. And that helps me pray for them because I understand them a little bit better. And as I eat with them and invest in that relationship and begin to get to know this person, again, it changes how I'm praying and what I'm hearing. And all of those things combined give me so many opportunities to turn around and serve them. You see, this isn't a program at the church. This isn't just a way or an approach that maybe we can get some more people or maybe we can win some more people on our side. This is the lifestyle of Jesus that he calls us as followers of Jesus to emulate. It's not about being deeper and smarter and more moral than everybody else. Sometimes it's as simple. Will you pray for them? Will you listen to them? Will you bring them in to have a relationship? Will you serve them? And the Samaritan, he was taking a risk. I don't know if you know this or not. Samaritans were seen as troublemakers. They were the problem. They were compromisers. They were traitors. They were the people that nobody else wanted to be around. As a matter of fact, Jewish people would actually literally walk around their country. I mean, they would have to go from north to south in their own country. They would walk around so we don't have to walk in their country. That's how far off they were put and how much of a problem they were seen as. And you know what? That's actually encouraging to me in a weird way. Because today, for so many of us, if people find out you're a Christian, when people find out you go to church, there's a lot of folks you're going to rub shoulders with. They're going to go, you're the problem. You guys being judgmental. You guys being hateful. You guys being too political. You're the problem. Like, why can't you just leave everybody alone? Why are you trying to make everybody live the way you think they should live? You are the troublemakers. And it encouraged me so much that the Samaritan was the troublemaker because he showed us something. If you're willing to feel people's needs, if you are willing to close the distance, if you are willing to do something, all of a sudden, all of those stereotypes can be overcome. All of the concerns that people have can go down. The mistrust that they might have because they say, well, you're a Christian, I don't know if I trust you, can die down. And it's the same way for us as followers of Jesus. Because like I said, this isn't a program. This isn't a campaign at the church. This is a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle that can change the world. And I know that's a big statement. And honestly, that gets overused. You know, I mean, laundry detergent's going to change the world. You know, putting that plastic bottle over here is going to change the world. And we use that too much. And I'm not smart enough to figure out how to change the world. Here's what I do know. When I start praying for people, when I start listening to people, when I make room in my life to have relationships with people that don't know Jesus, and I start to serve them, I do know this. My world changes. I change. They change. And that's exactly how Jesus has been changing the world for 2,000 years. He's done it for us, he's done it in us, and he's done it with us. And he will do it through us if we're willing. See, your world can change. And you can change the people in your world. You can start helping bring them back to God by blessing them. And this week, it starts with something as simple as serving them. Let's pray together.